Welcome to our channel, where we bring the most bone-chilling stories from the depths of Reddit's darkest corners. Join us as we explore the eerie tales that keep you up at night. If you like what you hear, please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notifications to never miss a spine-tingling story. Coming to after abruptly falling into unconsciousness is never a pleasant experience. I'm not sure which it was that began to pull me from the blackness which had cocooned me inside of it. The feeling of nausea and dizziness, or the faint sound of voices emanating from somewhere a ways away from me. All I know is, I slowly became aware that I was awake again. For a few moments, my mind was muddled, thoughts coming to me slowly as if they were slogging through waist-high mud. I tried as hard as I could to recall what had happened before I fell asleep. Did I drink too much again and pass out in the hotel room chair? And then, like a semi-truck smashing into me at 70 miles an hour, everything came flooding back, snapping me fully awake. I remembered where, and more precisely, when we were. I remembered the events of the 2 weeks. I remembered being attacked in the elevator by the bellhop who'd appeared out of nowhere. Remembered Paula and I rushing to what we thought was the safety of our hotel room. And I remembered the phone call I'd made. The sinister, sadistic voice of Arthur mocking me on the other end before the room had filled with some sort of gas and causing us to fall unconscious. As my vision returned to me, I also became aware that I was no longer in the hotel room. The dark, drab, gray concrete wall standing opposite me, combined with the faint sound of water dripping somewhere, gave me the idea that I was underground somewhere. Maybe a basement or something. I also became aware that I couldn't move anything except for my head. Glancing down, I saw I was tied with rather thick rope to some kind of metal chair, one which had its back to another. Paula. I twisted my neck around as far as it could go, my eyes locking on my wife's unmistakable blonde hair. Like me, she too was tied to the chair she had been sat in. Her head slumped forward, showing that she was still unconscious. Well, at least thank God she's not dead, I thought. The thought brought me a momentary feeling of relief, which was then shattered by the voice which spoke up, coming from somewhere off to my left. "Ah, good. You're finally awake, Daniel." I spun my head the other way and was immediately blinded by the bright light which snapped on. I jammed my eyes shut, wincing at the sudden ache in my temples. "Henry, you idiot, you blinded our poor guest here," the voice snapped. "Lower the brightness a bit, will ya?" The light became less intense, and after opening my eyes and blinking away the blue spots in my vision, I saw them. There had to be at least 5 or 6 figures standing just behind the light, one which looked to be an old-style construction spotlight. I also saw something which sent a lightning bolt of horror through me. The floor had what looked like dried bloodstains on it. Oh shit. Behind me I heard a groan, indicating that Paula was beginning to wake up. "And it seems your wife is coming round as well. What truly excellent timing indeed." Something inside my mind clicked, and I realized that I recognized the voice. "Arthur," I said simply, not phrasing it as a question, but more a statement. The sound of clapping came from behind the light, and one figure stepped in front of it. As my eyes adjusted, I saw he was still wearing his hotel uniform, though the warm, friendly smile I'd become well acquainted with was long gone. In its place, he wore a smile which gave a literal meaning to the phrase skin crawling. "Very good, Daniel," he said, before turning towards my wife, who was now struggling in an attempt to free herself. "And welcome back to the land of the living to you as well, Mrs. Clements." Instantly, I felt her go still behind me. "Where are we?" I heard her ask, her voice shaking slightly. Arthur let loose another eerie smile. "We're in the basement of the dunes, my dear," he answered, looking back at me and flashing a truly wicked smile. "And for the record, don't get the idea to try and scream for help. This section of the basement is soundproof, so nobody in the rest of the basement will hear you." "What the fuck do you want with us?" I demanded, glaring at the man. "And more to the point, how the hell did you know we're from the future?" I heard Paula let out a gasp behind me. Since she'd passed out, I never had gotten a chance to tell her what had been said to me over the phone. Arthur let out a low chuckle, then gestured behind him at the shadowy figures behind the light. "I suppose I should explain that, shouldn't I?" he said, as another figure brought him a chair to sit in. As the figure turned away, I saw the sneering face of the bellhop who'd attacked us. Arthur took a few steps forward before placing the chair down and taking a seat in it. After a moment of getting comfortable, he began to speak. "I've worked at this hotel and casino the entire time it's been here. I was personally asked to help run the day-to-day business on the hotel side by my boss and his group. And not long after we fully opened 7 years ago, we began to notice, well, shall we say, odd individuals show up from time to time. At first, we didn't know what to make of them, assuming they were simply being visited by peculiar men and women who had their own way to dress and speak. They had large amounts of money and had helped us during the rough months, so we never thought to look beyond that." He stood up and began to pace around us, circling us in almost the same manner a shark would circle a wounded fish or seal. "That was until one of the casino pit bosses caught one of them attempting to count cards at blackjack. Much like you two, we brought him down here to a place we wouldn't be disturbed. He wouldn't speak at first, as all of them tend to do, but, well," he let out a truly sinister snicker which made me shudder. "Everyone has their limit of pain where they break, and that is when we learned the truth. He said he was a time traveler, someone from far in the future who'd come back to visit here. He even told us where his machine was, up in his room. Of course, we didn't believe him at the time, and when I phoned Mr. Patriarcha to ask about what should be done with him, well, he drew his thumb across his throat, mimicking someone's throat being cut. We got rid of him." "Patriarcha," I mumbled, my brain whirring into gear as old memories from growing up on the East Coast began flying through my brain and connected with the name. "I'm sorry, did you say something?" Arthur asked, stopping his infernal circling and leaning towards me. I looked up at him, locking eyes with him. "Raymond Patriarcha," I said slowly, then chuckled and shook my head. "The Patriarcha crime family." A genuinely surprised look came over Arthur's face. "You know about Mr. Patriarcha and the family?" he asked. I nodded. "I grew up on the East Coast. His name is still infamous in those parts, even decades after his death, and I was always a bit of a history buff." A smile, not a mocking one, but almost the same genuine style I'd seen when first arriving spread across his face, and he reached out and patted me on the shoulder a few times. "Well, for the first time ever, I'm surprised by something someone from the 21st century said to me," he said happily. "I was wrong about my initial impression of you, Daniel. Please accept my apologies for my insult earlier. It's truly an honor to know the family ends up being burned into history. That Mr. Patriarcha does as well." He sighed and stood back up. "That makes it doubly a shame about what's going to happen to you. Anyway, back to what I was saying," he said, beginning to circle us again. "After we dealt with him, I was personally tasked with going up and getting rid of the man's luggage. I was in the middle of doing so when something small and silver fell out of his suitcase. I remember picking it up out of sheer curiosity, stepping out of the room. For the hell of it, I slipped it into my pocket and disposed of the rest of his belongings, keeping his cash to send back to the boss. I went out for a smoke after everything wound down, stepping out front, and started messing with it. All of a sudden, a bright white light flashed all around me, and when it disappeared, I was still outside. But the dunes? It was gone. I was still standing in front of a building, but it was one I'd never seen before. It had the name." He trailed off for a moment, scrunching up his face as he remembered. "Bellagio." He stopped circling again, sitting back down in the chair and looking back and forth at me and my wife. I saw strange, futuristic-looking cars driving along the strip. Everything looked different. Everything looked different. That was when I looked up at the sign out front with the same name as on the building, and saw the date on the sign, 2027, and then I knew. The man had been telling us the truth. He leaned back in the chair, laughing, almost at the mental absurdity of it all. After that, I frantically began hitting the buttons on the silver device again, and thankfully, the white light appeared again, and I was back in front of the dunes. I was going to make a call to Mr. Patriarcha to tell him about the truth when something stopped me. Something inside me told me to keep it to myself, because now I was the one with all the power, more power than any amount of money my boss ever could have, and I say that with all due respect to him. So, I decided to wait a while. That was when more of the strange-looking and speaking people began to show up. Some, I could tell, were like the man we took care of, time travelers, something straight out of an H.G. Wells novel. Others looked to be also from the future, but just not as futuristic seeming as the others. And that's when I learned something. And I actually learned it from another of the time travelers we captured, a woman. The last one we captured, actually. You see, when people from the future travel back to any point in time, they apparently can accidentally create something which the woman called a time slip. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but apparently it can accidentally suck people from any point in time back to when the person using their device goes. And that is when I had the great idea. You see, the rest of the outfit out here. He gestured to the figures behind the light, who all waved at us and laughed. We like to have a little fun with people. Always have. It's just a sort of appetite. He let loose the most sadistic, evil grin I'd ever seen him give, and I shuddered, knowing full well what he meant by that. But we don't want to draw attention to ourselves. We don't want to ruin the operation the boss has a stake in out here, and if too many people from here now begin to disappear, it'll draw too much heat on us. Likewise, if we make too many of the people who seem to deliberately time travel here disappear, it'll also ruin things. So we developed a system. You see, the device seems to be connected to others, as it'll give a warning when someone travels here. That's when we keep our eyes peeled. Because more times than not, it'll accidentally catch someone from a different time, be it the early 21st century or farther along. And they'll wind up here, confused and searching for a place to stay, just like you two did. He stood up again, now giving us both a shark-like grin. And that allows us two things. It gives us a chance to get money and futuristic technology to hold on to. And secondly, the shark-like grin widened. Well, unfortunately for you two, you're about to learn how we like to keep ourselves sharp when it comes to, well, let's just say, the techniques you probably have heard about us having. And no one will ever know, because here, in 1962, you don't exist yet. And in your time, you'll just simply have vanished. Like all the others before, you have... His speech finally finished. He stood as tall as he could, grinning at us and waiting for our reactions. There was a long stretch of silence. What about that dark, abandoned version of the hotel I found myself in? I finally asked. He shrugged. A little bit of future technology we swiped from the woman, he said simply. And the cameras? I asked. The ones I saw recording me as I ran? He chuckled. Well, we like to replay our interactions with our favorite guests for entertainment. It started with that little scare you had in the parking lot that first night. He pointed at one man. Henry had fun with you that night. And if a discerning buyer on the black market wants a film of that style, we're happy to oblige. You're all fucking evil, Paula spat out behind me. You're all sadistic bastards. Almost as one, Arthur and the others began to laugh. My dear, you do flatter us, Arthur said, wiping away tears from his eyes. I felt my temper flame. Fucking simpletons, I hissed under my breath. Almost at once, everyone went silent. Arthur took a few steps until he stood in front of me. Excuse me, he asked, his voice flat and emotionless. You fucking heard me, dumbass. I growled at him. You think you really scare me just because you're part of the mafia? I grew up around people far worse than you. Perks of having a single father who was a prison guard, who had to take his son along with him to work. I shifted my gaze between him and the shadowy forms of the others. You insinuated that I was dumb on the phone. Clearly, you and your people are not the cream of the crop when it comes to 20th century intelligence. All you are is a bunch of muscle-bound Neanderthals who accidentally stumbled across something you could never have the brains to create in a million years. No fucking wonder the mob ended up dying out. It was my turn to grin. I knew full well that the situation we were in was one we likely weren't getting out of. I'd attempted to loosen the knots in the rope during the man's speech, but they were done far too well and tight to wiggle out of. My mind flooded back to the tortures I remembered hearing the mob performing, and every fiber of my being trembled with fear at the knowledge that we were about to endure them ourselves. But if both of us were going to die, I was going to use my tongue to give them some mental and emotional barbs to remember us by, long after we were gone. And for the record, your oh-so-revered boss is now relentlessly mocked in my time for dying a frail old man of a heart attack. What a gigantic fall from grace. I now gave my own version of Arthur's shark-like grin. Time passing by's a bitch, ain't it? Instantly, I knew I'd hit a nerve. The emotionless mask Arthur had put on his face melded away, replaced by one of absolute rage. Then, it melted away, replaced with the evil grin he'd worn all the while. Well, Daniel, I'd originally been thinking about making it rather quick for you after you'd impressed me. You and your lovely wife. But after that insult, I think we're going to take our time with you. His face went emotionless again. Both of you. I felt the blood drain from my face. While I was certain we both were going to die, I'd hoped, in addition to stinging the man with the truth about the leader of his crime family, that whatever torturous death they had in store for us, I'd take most of it off my wife and project it onto me. But in hindsight, it was almost a certainty that others had attempted to bait him. The man wasn't an idiot. Arthur pointed at the group of men behind the light. Everyone follow me to the storage closet. I have a particularly fun demise for these two we'll all be able to take part in, he said, then pointed at the shape of one man. Except you. You stay and watch them. We'll be back in less than 10 minutes. And with that, he stepped back behind the light and walked away, his goons following after him. After a minute or so, I heard Paula let out a sigh behind me. You have any sort of plan, Danny? She asked softly. I snorted. I wish I did, I admitted. I'm trying to think of anything, but nothing's coming to me. She sighed again, and then I felt the tips of her fingers brush mine. Danny, if this is the last bit of time we're going to share on this earth, I just want you to know I love you so damn much. However this ends, meeting you was the best thing to ever happen to me. So, thank you. For everything. Tears formed in my eyes at her words. I love you too, sweetheart. I managed out. I was about to say more when I suddenly became aware of the sound of rapidly approaching footsteps. The lone remaining figure behind the light turned as someone else entered the room and spoke. Hey Mikey, Arthur sent for me to get you. Apparently he lost his set of keys and you're the only one with access to the backup set. He wants you to go get them and bring them to him at the storage room. The other man cursed, then hooked a thumb at us. Do me a favor and watch these two then, okay? Can do, the newcomer said, and the first man rushed out of the room. The sound of the man's departing footsteps disappeared. For a few more seconds, there was silence, and then the new man stepped into the light. My eyes widened slightly as I recognized the young man who'd operated the elevators for us the entire time we'd stayed in the dunes. He stood for a minute, staring at us, then looked behind him at the open door. Seemingly satisfied with something, he pulled something out from his pocket. I shrank back a bit when I saw the metal blade of a folding knife appear. But then he rushed to us and knelt down. I felt an odd sensation and suddenly realized what he was doing. He's sawing through the ropes. The man looked at me. Look, I don't have time to explain right now, but I honestly can't stand the things Arthur does to people anymore. So I'm going to try and help you both get out of here. A corner of his mouth pulled up in a half smile. Plus, I kind of got paid a lot of money by someone to make sure you stay okay. My mind raced as I felt the ropes loosen and fall away from my wrists. A moment later, the ones binding my ankles to the chair give way and stood up, trying to get some feeling into my legs. The man freed Paula a few moments after, and she stood up, rushing to me and embracing me with an almost ribcage-crushing hug and kiss. But there wasn't much time to do more. Hurry, follow me, the man said, and then moved to the open doorway. The two of us quickly followed him. He stared out into the gloomy hallway, then motioned for us to follow him. My heart beat hard in my chest as I stepped out into the stone hall after him. I felt Paula's hand on my shoulder as she followed close behind. We stayed as silent as we could, moving from one drab hallway to the next. As we drew close to a T-junction, I heard the sound of a group of men's voices approaching, laughing and talking excitedly. In here, the man said, opening a door to what looked like a small office. We all flew inside, and the man closed the door, leaving only a hair crack open. The voices grew louder, and I recognized Arthur's voice speaking over all the rest of them. Now, gentlemen, don't argue about who gets to go first. Remember, we're all going to have a turn with these on both of them, and you'll each get to take a souvenir to remember our fun by. Another man spoke up. I call dibs on the man's wedding ring. That thing looks nice. A third man spoke up. Then I call dibs on the woman's ring. It'd be something I'd love to give my wife for an anniversary present. I shuddered a bit in the dark. They're not only fighting for who gets to torture us first, but fighting with each other over who gets to strip things from our bodies like they're a flock of vultures. Despite all the terrifying and horrible things we'd been through so far, hearing that was perhaps one of the most soul-destroying and horrifying. The voices again grew distant as they moved down the hallway. We have to hurry, they'll realize you're gone in about 3 or 4 minutes, our rescuer whispered, then opened the door again and led the way back out into the hall. The hallways changed, from stone-sided and cold, back to the industrial style that places such as hotels and restaurants were known for. The man now walked upright, striding quickly along as he guided us past an industrial laundry room and a group of women folding sheets and towels. As we turned another corner, I almost let out a massive sigh of relief as I saw the metal doors of an elevator at the end of the hall. The man turned to us as he reached the doors and slapped the button to call it. Okay, now look, I've taken all your things from your room and put them in your car outside. I was supposed to get rid of both of them, so they didn't care what I was doing. He held his hand out, and I saw he was holding the keys to my BMW in them. I took them and held them in my own hand, then looked back up at him. They'll kill you for doing this, you know, I said. He let out a small chuckle as the elevator dinged, announcing its arrival. They would have tried killing me anyway, since I called and let Mr. Patriarcha know personally what his supposedly loyal men were withholding from him. He's already sent a lot of muscle to deal with Arthur and the others. Besides, he looked down at his feet. I don't think I could live with myself if I let another innocent person die at their hands. Paula reached out and put a hand on the man's shoulder. Thank you, she said simply, and the man nodded. He was about to say something else when the sound of thundering footsteps came from the way we'd come. Hurry, into the elevator, the man said urgently and pushed us inside. He stepped inside himself and slammed the button for the lobby. Just as the doors began to close, I saw the red, furious face of Arthur come around the corner. He held a pistol in his hands and aimed it at the elevator. Jimmy, you fucking traitor! He yelled, and squeezed off 2 or 3 shots. But the doors had already shut. I heard the sound of the bullets slamming into the other side of them. The elevator rose quickly. As I fought to catch my breath, I turned to the man, Jimmy. By the way, very quickly, who paid you to watch out for us? I asked. The man chuckled. Let's just say she loved having you and your wife at her performances and got concerned when you told her to not forget you. The realization flashed through my mind and I let out a soft chuckle. God bless you, Diana. I saw the same realization cross my wife's face, and a similar smile crossed her face. But then they faded as the doors opened, presenting us the empty elevator lobby. Come on, they'll be up here in a moment, Jimmy said, running for the main lobby. We followed close behind. As we ran, we passed a few guests who gave us puzzled looks. The main lobby, its check-in desk now vacant with a gold sign stating, "We've temporarily stepped out. Be back shortly," standing off to the side. As we ran into the entrance hallway, I heard the sound of a door slamming open, followed by men shouting, "Shit, here they come." Jimmy slammed his shoulder into the entrance doors, allowing Paula and I to rush out onto the entrance steps. Just as he'd said, the BMW sat in almost the exact same place it had when we'd arrived. What seemed like a lifetime ago. "Just drive back out the way you came in," Jimmy yelled at us. "If I've worked it right, you'll make it back to wherever you came from." Paula turned to look at him. "Come with us," she urged. But Jimmy shook his head. "Where you're from isn't a place for me. Besides, I have to hold them off long enough for you to escape." He shot a look over his shoulder as the yelling voices drew nearer, then back at us. "Now go!" He screamed the final 2 words at us before shutting the entrance door. I saw him reach up and lock them. "Come on," I shouted at Paula, then ran for my car. Sliding across the hood like some action movie hero, but feeling more like a character in a horror movie, I yanked open the driver's door and crashed into the seat. I saw my wife do the same. As I jammed the key into the ignition and twisted it, I shot one final look through the glass doors. Arthur and his men had already reached them. I saw many of them grabbing onto Jimmy, while others struggled to unlock the doors. "Drive, Danny!" Paula shouted at me, and I yanked the gear shift down into drive, stomping my foot down onto the accelerator. The rear tires squealed and the car shot out from under the entrance awning. In the rearview mirror, I saw the men finally stumble outside, and then we were skidding out onto the main road. I kept my foot hard down as the bright lights of the casinos flashed by us on all sides in a neon blur. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Paula suddenly twist around in her seat. "Oh shit, they're coming after us." Shooting a look in the rearview mirror, I saw a pair of headlights rapidly approaching behind. "Damn it," I hissed, looking down at the speedometer. We were doing at least 90 miles an hour. Something suddenly rang out, a sound I couldn't place at first. Then it came again, and I realized what it was. "They're shooting at us," I yelled. "Just keep going," Paula shouted back. In the distance ahead, I saw the neon sign welcoming us to Vegas. "I've just got to make it there." I kept repeating it as the pursuing car drew closer and closer. The sign rapidly approached us. In the rearview mirror, I saw the mask of animalistic rage and bloodlust on Arthur's face as he sat in the passenger seat of the car behind us. A moment later, I felt the impact as it slammed into us. The rear of the BMW broke loose for a moment, sliding to one side slightly, and I fought to regain control. "God, please do not let us die like this," I screamed inside my mind. I felt us get bumped from behind again, and a new wave of horror shot through me at the prospect this could all be over in a matter of seconds. That's when a bright white light suddenly flashed in front of us. "Holy crap!" I shouted, jamming my eyes shut against the blinding flash. For a few seconds, I could see the bright light behind my closed eyelids. Then, it slowly faded. After a moment, I opened my eyes again. Blinking rapidly, I looked in the rearview mirror, expecting Arthur and his gang to still be hot on our heels. But nobody was behind us. Nobody was in front of us either. All I saw was the black tarmac stretching out and away from us. "What happened?" I heard Paula say quietly in the passenger seat. I don't know," I managed out. Easing off the gas, I slowly brought the car over to the breakdown lane until it came to a stop. Keeping my foot on the brake and the car in drive, I leaned back in the seat. I looked at her. I don't know what happened. I stopped, then looked at her again. Wait, remember what Arthur said. When a bright flash of light happened, he suddenly found himself in the 21st century. Her jaw dropped open as my words registered. "Does that mean we're back?" I shook my head. I didn't know. For all I know, it's a freaking trick to get us to stop. Almost as if my thoughts had summoned it, a bright pair of headlights suddenly shot through the back window. My eyes flashed to the rearview mirror, and I saw a car rapidly approaching us. "Shit!" I cried out, stomping back on the gas. The car shot forward, but not quickly enough. The other car was going too fast to outrun, and for a horrible moment, I prepared myself to be riddled with bullets. But then, the car flashed by us. I blinked to make sense of what I was seeing. It wasn't a car from the 50s or 60s. It was a Dodge Challenger, a modern one. We are back. I looked at my wife, who also was staring at the rapidly disappearing car. She began to let out a relieved laugh as I again pulled the car over. This time I put in park and opened the door, stepping out. Turning back, I stared at the bright lights of Las Vegas, the present-day Las Vegas. "We made it," Paula quietly said as she moved to stand next to me. I looked at her, then smiled and put an arm around her. "We did, thanks to both Jimmy and Diana." I saw her bite her bottom lip. I hope he either managed to make it out or it was quick for him. She managed out. I nodded. "I do too." She looked up at me. "So now what do we do?" she asked. "I think I've had enough of a honeymoon. I'm ready to go back home. How about you?" I asked her. She looked up at me, standing up on her tiptoes to kiss me before nodding. Sparing a final look back at the city, the two of us got back into the car and pulled away. That was months ago now. Paula and I are safely back home in Washington. We're both trying to get back to our regular lives, which has been a bit difficult. Though after what the two of us experienced, I don't think anything will ever become normal again. Not after knowing things that people weren't supposed to. Knowing that time travel becomes a real thing. That time slips are also real. And that after all the horror movie monsters both of us grew up loving to watch, they pale in comparison to the true evil that human beings can be. I tried looking up anything about our savior Jimmy, hoping I'd find something about him through the internet which showed he'd made it out. But I never could find anything. In fact, it's more than a little difficult to find many detailed articles about the Dunes Hotel in general. Nothing more than items for sale on eBay, such as room keys and ashtrays, and historical blurbs about the hotel. After that, I tried looking up Diana Dors. I'd hoped the woman would still be alive today, so that I could find some way to send her a thank you. Without her, it's likely that Paula and I would be very dead right now, even if she didn't know the true scope of things. Sadly, though, I found out she passed away in 1984. To this day, I still hope she truly never did forget about us. Aside from that, though, we've seemed to settle back into a somewhat regular rhythm of life. Though I think it's safe to say we're more than a little scarred from our ordeal. We both still suffer from nightmares on a regular basis. She tells me hers are of being back in that basement, this time having no one come save us, and being tortured to death by the horde of laughing, evil men. Mine are of that as well. Though they're also of being attacked in that parking lot, of that nightmare alternate hotel they'd made using the time traveler's technology, and of one I have never told my wife of. A nightmare of waking up in the middle of the night to find a group of dark figures standing in our bedroom. Of hearing Arthur's sadistic chuckle coming from one of them, and hearing his voice. "You didn't think we wouldn't find you two eventually, did you, Daniel?" It's the one that wakes me up in a sheen of sweat the most. Even though likely Arthur and his men are all long dead in 2023, I still fear them using the tech they stole from their victims to travel from the 60s to here, track us down, and finish what they started. I've even bought more than a few guns for that very reason. I've placed them all around the house, and I conceal carry at all times. It just makes me feel somewhat better. I know if I keep this to myself, though, keep it all locked up inside, eventually it will eat away at me and mentally tear me apart. Which is why I've decided to post my account of what happened to us here. I know damn well nobody will ever believe a word I say, but that's okay. Writing about it actually seems to have helped somewhat, though, and that's all I can hope for. I do need to warn you all of one thing, though. If you ever decide to take a trip to Las Vegas, like my wife and I did, do yourself a favor and take the freeway into the city. Don't take the old way in. And if you decide to ignore my warning, and you do yourself a favor. One that could save your life and the lives of your loved ones. If you begin to see hotels and casinos that you've never heard of before, ones that look old-fashioned, don't stop at one. Don't decide to stay there a while, especially at the dunes. Turn around and drive as fast as you can back the way you came, while you still can. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more, please hit the like button and subscribe, as it means a lot, and hit the bell if you want to stay up to date with the latest scary stories. Don't forget to comment with any stories that you would like for me to do, and I will see you in the next one.